Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Up today it is a Great Western tank engine from Bachmann. Over the last couple of years we have heard a lot about the Great Western Large Prairie, and that's because both Hornby and Dapol have produced a model of it in 00 gauge. But today, for a change, I thought it might be nice to take a look at the Large Prairie's smaller brother, the Small Prairie. And so today we are looking at this. It is the Bachmann Great Western 4575 class. And this has been a staple of Bachmann's range for a really long time. In fact, it's still available today. They have a new version awaiting release. It is the Great Western Unlined Green, and that's available for an RRP of £164.95, an absolutely insane amount of money for a model that dates back this far, available from the retailers on pre-order for about £140. Now, I did not pay that much money for this version. This is the BR Green with lining, and I bought this in 2018, and this cost me just £93, which sounds a lot more like it, to be honest with you. Having said that, some retailers still do have this in stock for around the £100 mark, which seems much better. But today we're going to revisit this model. We're going to check out the level of detail. I mean, it is a beautiful model, regardless of how expensive it is now. But we'll also take a look at the mechanism for the first time, and of course, check the performance. So hopefully this will be a fun review. I hope you enjoy it. Let's take a look. Let's see what it's like. Alright, the Small Prairie. And I will be honest, I think the Small Prairie is my favourite of the two different Prairie sizes. I just find the small one to be quite elegant, really quite charming in its way. But which is your favourite of the two Prairies, small or large? Do comment down below to let me know. Anyway, let me show you the end of the box, because the version I have is 32-135B. It is a Class 4575 Prairie tank, number 5532. And like I say, it is in the BR lined green with the lake crest, and this has an 8-pin DCC socket. Now I should say, I don't know for sure whether the latest version of this model at £165 RRP has been upgraded in any way. But what I can say is that I'm not aware of any announcement Bachmann have made to say they've upgraded it, and I have checked the product page, which doesn't mention any upgrades, yet it does still say that this has the 8-pin socket, and I feel like if they were updating the chassis, then they would have updated that 8-pin socket. So as far as I know, the new models are based on the same toolings and everything as the old models. Anyway, let me show you the back of the box, because there is a brief history of the Small Prairie on there, so pause and read that if you'd like to, although I will give you a bit of history in just a second with a nice slideshow. But for now, let's rediscover this locomotive, shall we? Let's pull it out and take a look. Very, very small box, actually. It's only just large enough to fit this locomotive, as you can see. But yeah, it is a Small Prairie. I mean, they're not kidding. So we'll take a look at that in just a second. Let's have a look at the paperwork, though. Let's have a look. So this is for the 45XX locomotive, and this is an exploded diagram. This is really just for the chassis, isn't it? So you can see we've got the motor there, just a 3-pole motor in this one. It does say that on Bachmann's website. And there is the chassis. It's not split chassis or anything, obviously. It's got proper pickups and everything, but I don't think there are any bearings on the driving wheels or anything. So I say Bachmann haven't upgraded this locomotive. I think they should do at that price, that's for sure. Have we actually got any instructions proper with this? Yeah, it's just a little bit of, well, there's a page here about product maintenance and care, but it is quite generic. Yeah, it's just got all the usual information. So let's take a look at the model then. I did not notice any instructions that tell us where the accessories go, so I'm guessing they're going to be fairly basic accessories. And yet they do seem to be. So we've got a piece of brake rigging there, which obviously goes on the base, a couple of unpainted cylinder drain cocks, and also a vacuum pipe. So I think it is, I suppose, fairly self-explanatory where that stuff goes. So I'll pop that back on the box. Let's pull the engine out then and have our first look. Well, it's not the first look technically, but I haven't looked at this in a long while. So there is the loco, and as you can see, well, hopefully you can see, you'll definitely see it in a minute, The livery is absolutely beautiful on this. It is much nicer, in my opinion, than the unlined versions that Bachmann are producing now. The finish is okay. It's not the same quality finish that we tend to get from Bachmann these days. Hopefully that will be something that the new releases of this does a little bit better, because obviously it will be produced with Bachmann's most modern decoration techniques. So that, I'm pretty sure, will be the case. And I think given the size, really, the weight of this is fairly good, and one of the reasons for that is the die-cast running plate, so that at the very least is definitely a quality feature. Makes the loco feel quality, it feels good and sturdy, and more importantly it gives the loco a lot of weight, which is pretty crucial given the small size of this loco. But yeah, look at this thing. It is absolutely lovely, isn't it? It is the livery that sells this. The new ones do look fine, but to me they just don't have the same appeal as the fully lined versions like this. But of course the unlined will be useful to some, no doubt. I'm sure there will be a better fit for certain layouts, but for me personally, who just likes a nice looking engine, I prefer the lining if possible. But yeah, there we go, that is the locomotive. We'll take a close look at this in just a second and check out some of the detail. But for now, let's have a little history on the small prairies in real life. Introduced in 1927, just before the large prairie, the small prairie, or 4575 class, was 100 locomotives strong, and it was built to the design of Charles Collett. They were based on an old churchward design, as many of Collett's designs were actually, except these featured slightly larger driving wheels for increased speed. These tank engines were intended for mixed traffic work, mainly on branch lines, with some of them even fitted with auto apparatus for use on push-pull services. As I say, 100 examples were built in total, yet of course withdrawal eventually began in 1956 for this class, with the final example leaving service in 1964, and all but 11 examples were scrapped. The remainders, very fortunately, have been preserved. So there she is, Bachmann's Small Prairie up close and personal for you. And the way you remember what models are like is quite interesting, because I looked at this thing about 5 years ago and I don't remember this being a particularly impressive model. And so coming into this review 5 years later, I was thinking, yeah, this thing's going to be alright, but it's going to be falling behind modern standards quite significantly. And that's really not the case. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing a really well designed, pretty well detailed and a fantastic looking model. And it's quite surprising. I'm still completely clueless as to why this has to cost nearly £170 now, because it's a small locomotive with not that much complexity to it, and the latest releases of this that do cost that amount of money don't have any of the complex lining that this does, so I think they have significantly overcharged for it. But ignoring the price and just talking about this as a model, it's absolutely brilliant. I think it's really, really impressive. The weight is great because of that heavy die-cast running plate. It weighs in at 221 grams, which is only 9 grams lighter than the Hornby Large Prairie, which is of course a much larger locomotive. It's even 3 grams heavier than the Hornby 52XX, which is an even bigger locomotive, big beefy thing. So the weight for the size of this thing is really quite impressive. The quality is really good as well. It's well built. As you'll see, there's no visible glue, nothing wonky or anything. That's something that I've grown to appreciate a lot in the last 5 years. But let's start by talking about the livery and the decoration. So the finish is okay. It's not particularly glossy or satin, but it doesn't look too plasticky either. I'm going to stick with what I said a minute ago. I think Bachmann's latest releases do look better than this, but for what it is, I don't have any major problems. The lining is absolutely excellent though, as you can see, very nice and precise. And I say this has been very cleverly designed because there is no parting line across the top of the boiler, and yet the boiler is fully realistic all the way down underneath. Don't think I ever noticed that before, but that is a very, very realistic effect, isn't it? Anyway, back to the decoration. The side of the tank's nicely lined, as you can see, and they've got the late British Railways crest. And the lining continues around the coal bunker, as you can see, with the running number on it as well. No etched number plates provided with this loco. That is something I would definitely expect to see at the new and higher price. The cylinders also have lining on them as well, which is again very precisely done. I like that a lot. The buffer beams are separately painted, as you can see, and they do have the little coupling hooks fitted to them, but again, no couplings are provided for those hooks. That was fine when this model was £100 or so, but now it costs significantly more than that. Again, I think that's an upgrade they should be making. The buffers though are made of metal, separately fitted, and of course sprung. So that's quite a modern feature. I mean, this model dates back quite some time. It's got sprung buffers, which is great. The smoke box door has got a little bit of printed detail on it, as well as a partially separately fitted smoke box dart. That's not quite as fine as we'd see on a modern loco, and the back part of it is just moulded to the smoke box, but it's not too bad, it looks alright. And the loco does at least have the separately fitted lamp brackets, which actually look great. The running plate itself is well detailed. It's got full riveting on it, as well as these very fine metal handrails and grab rails. And in fact, all of the handrails on the model are metal, as you can see around the smoke box and the boiler, and also around the cab. Quite a few of those, in fact. The safety valve bonnet doesn't look too bad on this loco. I think we've seen better, but we've also seen worse. Quite clearly it is just painted plastic, it's not electroplated or in fact metal, but yeah, it's not the worst effect, and the same is true of the whistles. They are clearly just painted plastic. I think you would expect better again at the latest prices, but at about the £100 mark, this is all completely acceptable. And the chimney itself is just a black chimney as per this livery, but it is made of metal, and maybe that would allow Bachmann to produce a real copper chimney for this model if the livery called for it. So yeah, that's quite a good feature, isn't it? It's a good quality, at least. Up on top of the tanks, you've got quite a wealth of detailing. Much of this is separately fitted, and even that which is moulded is done very well. These little securing rings here, yeah, they're very, very realistic looking, even though they're just part of the moulding. The wheels are fully cast. Yeah, these are metal wheels. The axles are visible, but they've been painted over so that they're not too noticeable. And the coupling and connecting rods look decent as well. Yeah, nice and fine, no visible screws. Yeah, that all checks out. The cab area is okay, I would say. The glazing at least is nice. The front glazing is flush, and the rear windows have the very fine grille effect to them, which is awesome. The interior though is not a patch on more modern Bachmann locos. Arguably not very important because, I mean, look at it from the outside. This is the only way that you can see into the cab. So perhaps it would have been wasteful to put loads of painted detail inside the cab, and the more visible controls have been painted. So overall, I think the cab does the job. Yes, we've seen more impressive cabs elsewhere, but in this case, for this model, I do think it's adequate. Then again, if I'd paid a lot more for this, as you're expected to today, then perhaps yes, it would matter a bit more to me. Anyway, the coal load is okay. I'm not sure if this one's removable. This one does seem quite firmly fitted into position, but it's not too bad, yeah, fairly realistic. Around the back, you've got the vacuum pipe pre-fitted, a few separately fitted steps on the back of the bunker, as well as more separately fitted lamp irons, more sprung buffers, and this loco does have its couplings pre-fitted, and they are pre-fitted to the ponies, the pony trucks, on the front and the back. They were factory fitted. So overall, it's a beautiful locomotive. It's quite finessed, isn't it, really? Not necessarily expecting that, given the age of this tooling now, but actually it does a fairly good job of looking modern and up to date. And I think there are far more outdated locomotives in Bachmann's range than this. Now, from what I remember, that does not hold true for the mechanism. I think things are far more dated and, let's say, poor quality inside there, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But in terms of the looks and the appearance of this loco, it's pretty much spot on, isn't it? Much better than I remembered, anyway. Right, let's move on. Let's talk about the mechanism, and then we'll try this thing. So there she is, the Bachmann Small Prairie. Keep wanting to say large. If at any point I'll have, apologies. Anyway, it's down onto the track. It's ready for its test. As I suspected, or as I remembered, yeah, the mechanism is really not up to modern standards. Even for 2018, this is quite a dated mechanism, and to say that Bachmann are still looking to produce this loco today at a much higher price, I have to disapprove of that quite strongly, because this is not a quality mechanism. It does have full pickups on its driving wheels though, traditional wiper pickups, no problem with that. The base keeper plate though is hardwired, so you've got wires connecting the pickups, which means you can't fully remove it for servicing. That's inconvenient, and most expensive models, in my opinion, need to be serviceable so that they can last a reasonable amount of time. That's still possible with this, but it's much more difficult than it should be. You can also see there are no proper bearings on the driving wheels. The axles just sit straight into the chassis. At least the axles sit into rounded slots though, not square ones, as sometimes Bachmann does, so that's decent. The chassis itself is very bare bones. There is no extras on this, no lights or anything like that. It does just have a 3-pole motor, unfortunately, and I'm not a big fan of these motors. I find them quite unreliable. I've had quite a few of them fail in the past. However, I will admit, at least in this locomotive, it does perform well. There is also no flywheel and also no cover over the worm drive, which is unfortunate in this case because it's right next to the decoder socket. So you've got all the mess of that lubricant, which flies everywhere when you run the motor, right next to your sensitive electronics. And the decoder socket itself is indeed just an 8-pin socket, which is quite outdated by modern standards. And just to reiterate, Bachmann's listing for the 2022 model does still specify the 3-pole motor and the 8-pin decoder socket, and that tells me they still haven't updated the chassis, so this is what you will get if you pay £165 or £140 I think it was at the retailers. And I think this is pretty much unacceptable. They should be spending some of that massive amount of money on upgrading the loco. I think it would be well worth it. The gauging though is okay at 14.2 to 14.3 millimeters, which is pretty close to the standard. So the mechanism is disappointing, but I have to say the performance itself is really, really good. So let's give this a run. A little bit wobbly in reverse, I think, but as you can see, it is perfectly smooth. The loco, I should say, is fully running, so I don't have to worry about doing that today. Let me show you the gearing. Well, let me show you the speed. So I'm going to set this to 50. Here we go, run past. Does seem to be quite fast, but as we're going to see, that doesn't affect the low speed, which means that the loco is capable of producing decent performance at any speed you like. But let's show you the crawl. To be honest, for a 3-pole motor, that's not bad. So no, I'm not a fan of the motors in this loco, and I'm not expecting it to last a lifetime, that's for sure. But in terms of raw performance, it is absolutely fine. Yeah, it does do the job. And the loco's performance, I have to say, is very impressive given how poor quality the mechanism is. Look at that. So yeah, the performance is really, really good, and it's reliable as well because it's got plenty of pickups, so it doesn't do any cutting out on points and such. I'll show you that. Let's go, well, that's not that slow actually. Let's slow down a bit more. There we go, over the dead zone there. Did not die, so that's really quite impressive. Another quite impressive aspect of this loco is the pulling power. So I've just measured 0.26 newtons of tractive effort on this, which is the same as Hornby's Large Prairie, even though Hornby's Large Prairie is 10 grams heavier and it's large. And it's even the same as a Black 5, the same as this. So the die-cast running plate has definitely done this loco proud. So to test the pulling power, I have set up 5 collet coaches. I used to have 4, but I found another one in my box of review items, so I've added that on. Let's see how she gets on with those. Oh, I better show you the torque as well, because there is plenty of it. Here you go. That's 50%. So it's fully able to turn its wheels very easily, even under load. Not all locos can do that. Hornby Large Prairie. Sorry about that. Hay fever, you know. Anyway, let's go couple. Right, so this should be capable of doing a really controlled coupling. In fact, that was a bit too controlled. All right, have we got it? Dodgy couplings on these coaches, so I better check. Yes, we have, okay. Right, let's send it off. I think 50 is a bit fast for a branch line passenger speed, so I'm going to go for about 40, but as we'll see, there's still plenty of torque, even at that speed. So there she goes, with a nice train of collet coaches. Perfect match. So today's theme on the layout is going to be Great Western liveried tank engines. So see if you can spot the odd one out to that theme, and I'll pin the first comment that correctly guesses. On the middle line though, I've got the farcically underpowered Hornby Large Prairie, which is that 60% speed right there, by the way. And if I grab a coach, look at that. The wheels slow down to a crawl. Terrible torque in that mechanism. Absolutely awful. And then on the inside line, we have the better running of the Large Prairies, which is of course the Dapol one. Still not perfect though this, because the rear pony wasn't designed correctly, and that caused the driving wheels to get lifted off the track. I've fixed that now so that this is now running correctly, but I have to say it is the Bachmann Small Prairie that is the only Great Western Prairie model that does work properly and correctly straight out of the box in my experience. So, to be clear, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the way the Bachmann Small Prairie runs. It's a real model performer in every sense of the word. However, I think in the interests of quality, longevity, value for money, and also compatibility with the latest decoders, it really would be good to see Bachmann make some upgrades to this chassis, namely proper bearings, a removable base keeper plate which makes better servicing, perhaps a modern coreless motor, maybe even with a flywheel, and a next generation DCC socket. I think those sorts of features would definitely make this model worth what Bachmann are now charging for it. I do think it's quite disappointing that Bachmann are still the kind of company that would slap a new price on something like this, you know, the best part of 200 quid or 140 from the retailers, and not address these issues. Yeah, I still can't really understand them for that. But in terms of the way the model looks, quite clearly this is a gorgeous, gorgeous engine. And with my example, it's a gorgeous livery, which is very well executed. So overall, yeah, this is still a good model. Let's have some ratings then for the Small Prairie from Bachmann. The level of detail, I'm going to give this a 4-star. Overall, it's really quite impressive. The decoration is very high quality and incredibly well done. The banding and everything looks lovely. Loads of separately fitted parts. They're all fitted with finesse and they're all nice and fine. It's got sprung buffers. It does lose a mark though for the plasticky looking details such as the safety valve bonnet, the slightly lacking cab, and also the lack of proper screw or chain link couplings. I think particularly at the latest price, those things ought to have been addressed. Performance though, I have given 5-star. Yeah, despite the downfalls of the mechanism here, the actual performance is faultless. Really nice and smooth, got plenty of power to it, and what's more, the crawl is absolutely fantastic. So definitely a 5-star performance. The pulling power similarly is pretty good for the size of this loco. 18 coaches or 0.26 newtons. That's the same as Hornby's large Prairie, and like I say, the same as a Black 5. So really for its size, pulling power is excellent. The mechanism though is the lowest rated category for me because there are no proper bearings on the driving wheels. It's a 3-pole motor without a flywheel, not very serviceable because all the pickups are hardwired, and it's got an outdated DCC socket. To be honest, in 2022, you'd expect to see quite a lot better than this. The quality though is pretty decent. I've given it 4-star. Die-cast running plate, lots of weight, high build quality, no visible glue, just loses a star for the slightly poor quality mechanism, but apart from that, the quality is spot on. Value for money then, the latest RRP for these is £164.95, which I don't think is very good value at all. I paid £93 for mine in 2018, and today if you want to get one of these new, it's going to cost you about £140. For £93, that's what I paid, it's a 5-star easily. However, at the newer prices, it's much more like a 2, so I've split the difference and given it 3-star. Overall then, that is 7.65 out of 10. It's a pretty good score actually for a model of its age. Let's pop this into the logbook, and there it is, 11th place above the B12 and below the upgraded Hornby A1. Overall, a fantastic loco. If you can find one at the right price, still highly recommended. Well folks, thank you very much for tuning in to another one of my reviews. I hope you enjoyed this. I think this one was well worth doing. I had completely forgotten just how much of a lovely, lovely engine this was, and so getting to rediscover it today was absolutely awesome. And it's a good performer as well, so if you're not really that bothered about maintaining your locos or what sort of quality mechanism they've got, and I suppose getting slightly ripped off, then there's no reason, slightly absurd way of putting it, but there is nothing that would stop me recommending this loco except for the short list I've just described. But no, all in all, it's a great loco, I think. Yeah, it's very well done, and it's not far from being spot on, in my opinion. So again, thank you for watching. I will see you very, very soon for another review, and until then, keep safe, enjoy the hobby, and I'll be back very soon. All right, cheers folks, catch you next time.